Special edition of the Open Eye for Black History Month. Okay, okay, there we go. All right, I'm on there now. I'm live. Sir, ready to get it started. All right, get my radio voice. There it is. That's my radio voice. All right, all right. Yeah, I got on a mask. Yeah, I got on a mask. You know, I'm here by myself. Other people use the mic, can't take no chances. And I use the mic. I don't want them to take no chances. All right, all right. A few seconds here. Get it started. All right. Put up that theme music. All right, go to the show. All right. It's a nice song, ain't it? There's a theme music for opening. All right, all right. Those of us that indulge in work based on intellectual abundance and do so to measure and anticipation of eager victims. We do so because changes of impression is so easily difficult to do. Good afternoon, my children of the sun. I guess you're wondering, hey, what's going on? It's only Tuesday. That sounds like the open eye optometrist, third eye optometrist, Patrice Gibbs. It sure is, Wilmington. And also Facebook friends, because I am live on Facebook. That's right. I'm in here doing a little special broadcast for Black History Month. Yeah, sir. This is the special broadcast of the Open Eye. Yes, indeed. Patrice Gibbs, your third eye optometrist and open eye host, right here on WHGE 95.3 FM. Yes, indeed. Yep. By now, I'm sure you realize, I'm sure you know. If you don't, shame on you. It is February, Black History Month. This day in February, my family made history. My father's youngest was born on this day. Happy birthday, little brother Kurt. All right, had to get that in there. You know that. Like I said, this is Black History Month. And like I mentioned Saturday, Black History Month was not given to us, was not pushed on us. Where you have people say, oh, they gave us the shortest month of the year for Black History, February. You know they did that on purpose. White people, no, white people had nothing to do with when we celebrate Black history. And of course, we celebrate Black history all year long, as well we should. Who the hell told you you had to wait until February to study our history? Study our history all year long, 365. Now, Black History, no, not Black History Week, Negro History Week, the precursor to Black History Month, was created in 1926 in the United States when historian Carter G. Woodson and the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History announced the second week of February to be Negro History Week. Great historian Carter G. Woodson sent out a press release announcing the first Negro History Week. He chose February because the month contained the birthdays of both Abraham Lincoln, who our people at that time celebrated. We learned more in later years, but we celebrated Abraham Lincoln as the great emancipator because he signed the Emancipation Proclamation. That was also the week or the month of the birthday of Frederick Douglass, a very prominent figure in our history, of course. African Americans already celebrated Lincoln's birthday and Frederick Douglass' birthday. Okay. I think it was in 74, maybe 75, President Gerald Ford signed a proclamation declaring February Black History Month. Okay, so that's where that came from. All right. Moving right along. Let me see something. Yeah. Oh yeah, we're live. That's right. Okay. I got some things for you. Some things you might have heard before, but that's okay because we learn by repetition. All right, and I call this "What If." What if we realized what a precious commodity time really is and began to use it wisely? What if we came to understand the ramifications behind the fact that if African Americans were a nation, we would be the 10th richest nation in the world? What if we got reparations? Will we know what to do with the money? What if we stopped studying our history as a yearly celebration of our struggle? Say that again. What if we stopped studying our history as a yearly celebration of our struggle? What if we began to study our history from a sociological perspective and apply the theories and philosophies that made the ancient Black man the progenitor of civilization? Powerful weapon we possess. What if we begin to fill that most powerful weapon with the ammunition of the knowledge of progressive revolution instead of wallowing in the ignorance of reactionary regression? What if the coming generation can see the old guard leadership for what it is? Complacent, self-serving, more interested, and quick fix glories instead of long-term solutions. What if we stop getting caught up in externals and realize sagging jeans and a tattoo will not make you thugged out if you are not a thug? A suit and tie won't gain you any mainstream acceptance at the bank if you can't verbalize the alphas and omegas of finance. And a trip to your local African boutique will not make you Black to the cause. What if we knew the powerful effect Black people have on the world? We're only, 12% of the American population, yet we influence every facet of American culture and life, from sports and entertainment to technology and business, fashion, music, style, attitude, politics, even language. It is commonplace now for mainstream network reporters to use the term "diss," a hip-hop slang meaning disrespect. Every facet, that's power. I don't know. I was just wondering what if. The Open Eye is brought to you by the Delaware Center for Homeless Vets, founders and builders of the Pearl Center. Delaware Center for Homeless Vets, changing veterans' lives all over Delaware. WHGE 95.3 FM, The Open Eye. Patrice Gibbs, third eye optometrist. Special broadcast of The Open Eye for Black History Month. And listen, one of the things I like to talk about are those people that you could consider badass in our history. You ever heard of Robert Smalls? Robert Smalls was born into slavery in 1839. During the Civil War, he stole a Confederate military ship that was in 1861. He disguised himself as the captain. He used secret code books. He used the secret code book and hand signals to pass Confederate guard ships. He rescued more slaves and their families and escaped to freedom. He worked as a military advisor to the Union until the war's end. He bought a house, ran for Congress. He won during Reconstruction, went on to live happily ever after. And I'm pretty sure, if I recall, let me see if I got something else on here. Wait a minute. Well, I'm pretty sure that he, there was a Navy ship named after him. And it hasn't been there, sure it's ought to be. Robert Smalls, a serious badass in history. All right. And of course, I had to bring him up because, he's military. Another, being a veteran, Have you ever heard of Eugene Jacques Bullard? Chances are you haven't. Don't feel bad because probably not one American in a million have. And of course, that is a national tragedy. Eugene Jacques Bullard, the first African-American fighter pilot in history. But he is also much more than that. He's also a national hero, and his story is so incredible that I bet if you wrote a movie script based on it, Hollywood would reject it as being too far-fetched. Bullard was an expat living in France. And when World War I broke out, he joined the French infantry. He was seriously wounded, and France awarded him the Croix de Guerre and Médaille Militaire. These were medals in France. Pardon my French accent. I don't really speak French. In 1916, he joined the French Air Service, and he first trained as a gunner, but later he trained as a pilot. When American pilots volunteered to help France and formed the famous Lafayette Escadrille, he asked to join. But by the time he became a qualified pilot, they were no longer accepting new recruits. So he joined the Lafayette Flying Corps instead. He served with the French flying units, and he completed 20 combat missions. In World War I. When the United States finally joined the war, Bullard was the only member of the Escadrille or the French Flying Corps who was not invited to join the U.S. Air Service. The reason? Can you take a guess? Of course, at the time, the Air Service only accepted white men. Now, here's the part that almost sounds like a sequel to Casablanca, all right? The famous Humphrey Bogart movie. After World War I, Bullard became a jazz musician in Paris, and he eventually owned a nightclub called Le Escadrille. When the Germans invaded France and conquered it in World War II, his club and Bullard became hugely popular with German officers. But what they didn't know was that Bullard, who spoke fluent German, was actually working for the Free French as a spy. He eventually joined the French infantry unit, but he was badly wounded and had to leave the service. By the end of the war, Bullard had become a national hero in France. But he later moved back to the US, where he was, of course, completely unknown. Practically no one in the United States was aware of it when, in 1959, the French government named him a National Chevalier, or a knight. In 1960, the president of France, Charles de Gaulle, paid a state visit to the United States. And when he arrived, he said that one of the first things he wanted to do was to meet Jean-Jacques Bullard. That sent the White House staff scrambling because most of them, of course, had never even heard of Mr. Bullard. They finally located him in New York City, and de Gaulle traveled there to meet him personally. At the time, Jean-Jacques Bullard was working as an elevator operator. Not long after Eugene Bullard met with the president of France, he passed away, and today, very, very few Americans, and especially African Americans, even know who he is. But now you do, because you listen to The Open Eye. I hope you'll be able to find opportunities to tell other people about this great hero that probably only one American in a million has ever heard of. And that's a damn shame, but it is what it is, isn't it? Jean-Jacques Bullard, remember him. Especially if you're a veteran. All right. Let me see where I'm gonna go here. Yeah. I was born and raised in Wilmington, Delaware. And as a child and teenager coming up, I attended church. That was required, like it was for many African Americans coming up. I attended one of the most important historical churches in the country, the Mother African Union First Colored Methodist Church. Originally founded in 1813 by Peter Spencer. The original location was 9th and French, where right now there is Peter Spencer Plaza, and it's called Peter Spencer Way. Okay. When I was writing for the Wilmington Spectator, or maybe the Wilmington Gazette, I had the good fortune to interview Peter Spencer's great-grandson, who remembered August Courtney, and that was back in 1993 that I interviewed him. He died not long after, in his late 90s. The Big Quarterly, Wilmington's oldest folk festival, celebrates the founding of the Mother African Union Church, First Colored Methodist Protestant Church in 1813 by Peter Spencer. It was the first Black denomination independent of the white man. Yeah, I know a lot of people, Richard Allen, okay, founded the first independent Black church, but actually Peter Spencer's church was the first independent Black church incorporated in the United States. I remember when they called it Union Church, said James Alfred Spencer Jr., great-grandson of Peter Spencer. Union Church of African Members was the name the church was originally incorporated under. That's what my great-grandpappy called it. James Spencer told the Gazette. Yeah, I was writing for the Gazette, as he proudly gazed at the sculpture commemorating his noted ancestor. Mr. Spencer, a vigorous 93-year-old devout Christian, would get a twinkle in his eye His face would break out with a warm smile whenever he talked about the big quarterly. I really looked forward to that last week in August when I was a boy. My father would bring me up to the corner, 8th and French Streets. We could smell the food all the way up the hill. Mr. Spencer was born and raised on the east side of Wilmington. August Courtly is not as big as it used to be. See, it used to be row houses over there. He points to the city county building and hotel. And Easy and Church was on the corner where the state building is now. That was the first church great-grandpappy started, but the white man took over. Mother Church, or Union as it was called, was right here. Peter Spencer Plaza on French Street between 8th and 9th Streets. Back then, French Street went all the way down to the train station. People would start coming in Friday night. They would cook all night Friday and all day Saturday. See, they would start around 4th and French Streets and go straight through 9th Street. There would be people everywhere on Walnut Street, French Street, and on up to King Street. People come from all over the country, and even from Canada, come to celebrate. French Street couldn't hold them all. It would seem Mr. Spencer enjoyed the big quarterly more in the old days. He related, well, yes. See, they had more church services then, more rejoicing in the Lord. And them people were strict back then. Didn't have all this ring around the rosy, children disrespecting their elders and such. My mother whipped me right at the big quarterly for this, and then my daddy kicked me in my tail for making my mama whip me. When asked what church he now attends, Mr. Spencer took a wistful look around Peter Spencer Plaza, where Mother AUFCMT Church was located until 1970 when it moved to 9th and Franklin Streets. He said they should never move from our ancestral home. They sold out. That's when I left Mother Church, when they sold out. The proud smile came back. I attend Greater Bethel at 29th and Van Bruin Streets now, he said. I'm father of the church there. Ain't nothing they won't do for me. The members of Greater Church call me Pop Spencer. They my church family. They my family. At Greater Bethel, Pop Spencer, who is head deacon, is held in high esteem, or was head deacon, was held in high esteem that his 90-something years of wisdom accorded him. Now in Mother Church, that generation that sold is gone. And the next generation are the elders now, and they bringing Big Quarterly back to what it was. So every year, I go to Mother Church and come down here and speak about the Big Quarterly and Peter Spencer. That's why I'm here talking to the Gazette, because I'm going to speak at the quarterly this year and want people to know the history so they can pass it on. Learn so they can pass it on. Pop Spencer. Words to live by. And like I said, I was very fortunate to interview Peter Spencer's great grandson in his waning years. This is Open Eye, 95.3 FM. I'm Patrice Gibbs. Amen. right, McKee. I got you. I'll definitely bring that up. WHGE 95.3 FM, The Open Eye. I'm your host, Patrice Gibbs, on this special edition of The Open Eye, Black History Month. Brother Booker and McKeeb sent me a message that he is trying to get the city of Wilmington to paint a solid red, black, and green stripe in front of the courthouse across from Rodney Square for the month of February to commemorate Black History Month. I don't see why they shouldn't, since during St. Patrick's Day, the week of St. Patrick's Day, maybe for most of March, they paint a green line, solid green line to commemorate the Irish down King Street. So yes, indeed, we should definitely support Brother McKeeb's effort to get the red, black, and green painted down King Street. If you're listening up, Wilmingtonians, call your city council person and make some demands on them. After all, they work for you. You voted them in. Make them support their community. Big ups, brother McKee. All right. It's talking about badasses in our history. Talked about a couple of brothers. It's time to talk about a sister. Ida B. Wells. Someone we should really know. We should really know all about. Ida B. Wells was an African-American journalist and activist who led an anti-lynching crusade in the United States in the 1890s. Ida B. Wells was, like I said, a journalist, an abolitionist, a feminist who led the anti-lynching crusade in the United States in the 1890s. She went on to found and become integral in groups striving for African-American justice. Between, say, Reconstruction and probably 1950, there were some 4,000 African-Americans lynched by white supremacists in the United States. That was one of the causes that Ida B. Wells fought against. And during her efforts to bring a stop to this, one thing that came out, and it may have been one of the places that it started, there were businessmen in her area, I think, in Mississippi. I'll go deeper into the story, but as a rule, white supremacist, white society, the mainstream white America, did not like the ideal of having competition in business from Black people, especially Black men. If you notice, I know you've seen pictures of Black men being lynched, Black men hanging from trees, strange fruit, as Billie Holiday called it. It may be something you may not have noticed about these victims of this terrorism. Most of the time, They were in suits and ties. Why was that? Because they were businessmen. White supremacy was killing off competition. Ida B. Wells was born a slave in Holly Springs, Mississippi on July 16, 1862. Wells was the oldest daughter of James and Lizzie Wells. The Wells family, as well as the rest of the enslaved people of the Confederate States, were decreed free by the Union thanks to the Emancipation Proclamation. And this was about 6 months after Ida's birth. Now, the Emancipation Proclamation, which many of you may not know or be clear about, only freed the slaves in the Confederate States that had seceded from the Union. Those slave states that remained in the Union, like Delaware, were allowed to keep their slaves. See, this was just a tactic to damage the Confederate States economically, because the slaves provided free labor, of course. Living in Mississippi as an African American, the Wells family faced racial prejudices and were restricted by discriminatory rules and practices. Wells' parents were active in the Republican Party during Reconstruction. Let me definitely slow it up right there. The Republican Party of the 1880s, 1890s was not the Republican Party of today. The Republican Party then was, of course, the party of Lincoln, but it was also the party of Thaddeus Stevens. Look him up. The Republican Party was the liberal political entity of that time. It was not what the racist morons that put Trump in office. You know, the parties actually flipped over time. In the 30s, blacks started leaving the Republican Party and voting in favor of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR. Though many still stayed in the Republican Party up through the 50s. By the early 60s, because of John Kennedy and Robert Kennedy's assistance to Dr. King, many black Republicans started shifting over to the Democratic Party, in spite of the stronghold of the Dixiecrats in the South. Now, of course, when LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson, signed the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act into law, he correctly stated that the Democrats gained the support of African American citizens for at least a generation. And that was absolutely right. And of course, in anger, the Dixiecrats, the Southern Democrats, left the party and joined the Republican Party, following, of course, Richard Nixon's Southern strategy, where, you know, he promised to turn back the clock on the gains made by African Americans. By the time of Ronald Reagan, the Republican Party was the party of bigotry and racism. Ronald Reagan being one of the worst racists to sit in the White House probably since Woodrow Wilson. Ronald Reagan did more damage to the country even than the Orange disaster than Trump. All right, let's get back to Ida B. Wells. Okay. As a civil rights journalist and activist, Wells wrote about issues of race, politics in the South. A number of her articles were published in Black newspapers and periodicals under the moniker Iowa. Wells eventually became the owner of the Memphis Free Speech and Highlight, and later of the Free Speech. On one fateful train ride from Memphis to Nashville in May 1884, Wells reached a personal turning point that resulted in her activism. After having bought a first-class train ticket, she was outraged when the train crew ordered her to move to a car for African Americans. She refused on principle. As Wells was forcibly removed from the train, she bit one of the men on the hand. She sued the railroad, winning a $500 settlement in a circuit court case. The decision was later overturned by the Tennessee Supreme Court. This injustice led Ida B. Wells to pick up a pen and write. While working as a journalist and publisher, Wells also held a position as a teacher in a segregated public school in Memphis. She became a vocal critic of the condition of Black-only schools in the city. In 1891, she was fired from her job for these criticisms. She championed another cause after the murder of a friend and his two business associates. As I mentioned earlier, white supremacy did not like competition in business from Black men, and still don't. Don't get that mixed. Oh, hell no. They still don't. A lynching in Memphis incensed Wells and led her to begin her anti-lynching campaign in 1892. Three African-American men, Tom Mose, Calvin McDowell, and Will Stewart, set up a grocery store. Their new business drew customers away from the white-owned store in the neighborhood. And the white store owner and his supporters clashed with the three men on a few occasions. One night, Mose and the others guarded their store against attack and ended up shooting several of the white vandals. They were arrested and brought to jail, but they didn't have a chance to defend themselves against the charges because a lynch mob took them from their cells and murdered them. Wells wrote newspaper articles decrying the lynching of her friend and the wrongful death of other African Americans, putting her own life at risk. She spent 2 months traveling in the South, gathering information on other lynching incidents. One editorial seemed to push some of the city's white people over the edge. A mob stormed the office of her newspaper, destroying all of her equipment. Fortunately, Wells had been traveling to New York City at the time, because if she hadn't, she would have been lynched. And she was warned that she would be killed if she ever returned to Memphis. Staying in the North, Wells wrote an in-depth report on lynching in America for the New York Age, an African American newspaper run by former enslaved person T. Thomas Fortune. In 1893, Wells published a Red Record, a personal examination of lynchings in America. Wells went on to have very significant accomplishments in her life before she died. Working on behalf of all women as part of her work with the National Equal Rights League, Wells called for President Woodrow Wilson to put an end to discriminatory hiring practices for government jobs. Wells also created the first African-American kindergarten community and fought for women's suffrage. In 1930, she made an unsuccessful bid for the Illinois State Senate. Wells died on March 25th, 1931, at the age of 68 in Chicago, Illinois. Wells left behind an impressive legacy of social and political heroism. With her writing, speeches, and protests, Wells fought against prejudice no matter what potential danger she faced. She once said, "I felt that one had better die fighting against injustice than to die like a dog or a rat in a trap." It's Ida B. Wells. Someone we should definitely commemorate. Ida B. Wells. Another, as I say, badass in our history. This is WHGE 95.3 FM, The Open Eye, special edition. I'm your host, Patrice Gibbs. I'm going to take a little music break here so I get my ducks in a row, excuse me. I'm on my own without No Sarama. No Sarama, where you at? Come on down to the station, damn it. Yes, indeed. Wait a minute. Let me get my ducks in a row here. Be patient, y'all. I'm with you. Open Eye. All right, all right. All right. WHGE 95.3 FM, the education station, also the advocacy station. Because if you see something going on in your community, let somebody here on our staff know. We will definitely talk about it. And we don't pull no punches. I know I sure as hell don't. And of course, what we've been dealing with throughout our history is the murder of unarmed Black people. I was going to say unarmed Black men, but unarmed Black people by the police. See, this is not anything new. Not by a long shot. This is nothing new. It's just that now we have video and we can very easily document this. Remember where the police came from, where the cops came from. The original job of the cops were twofold: to protect the property of the rich and to capture runaway slaves. Then when slavery ended, the job of the police force in the Black community was to contain us, to keep us down, to make sure we knew our place in America. And they are still pushing that effort. So if you don't know your history, you won't know why things are going on now. Which is why it's very important that you don't wait till February to study your history. Understanding propaganda and the murder of Black people by the state. In order for the state to get away with murdering, especially at genocidal levels, a targeted population in its society, that target population must be shown to be deserving of its fate. The propaganda must be swift, strong, constant, and there must be consistency in the demonization of the murder victim. No matter what the murder victim's station in life, no matter how they live, no matter what their accomplishments, they must be shown in the worst possible light. A blight on society that we were better off without. Whatever mistakes or transgressions this person may have committed, whether they stole a candy bar from the corner store, or was truant from school, or spanked their kids, it must be exposed, embellished, and used as evidence of the victim's inability to live within acceptable social norms, and thus the orchestrator of their own demise. Furthermore, the victim's transgressions must also be used as evidence of the entire target population's endemic pathology. The propaganda must be so strong that the dominant population, and even a percentage of the target population, not only accepts the continuous abuse and murder of members of the target population, but blames the target population for the abuse and murder committed against them. That the abuse and murder that befalls the target population is the result of their inability to win the acceptance of the dominant population. God bless America. Cut the crap. Racism is America's religion. And propaganda has been its greatest tool in practicing the subjugation and murder of Black people. America was founded on racism, and it is embedded in American society with such fanatical fervor that it is a factor in every stratum of the society's institutions. America is highly skilled in disseminating propaganda in support of its murderous racist fanaticism, because it has practiced doing so from its inception. Highly successful in branding the Native American a savage, the genocide that followed the propaganda reduced the Native American population from 60 million to 800,000. Successfully dehumanizing Africans, Blacks in America have lived under the terror, oppression, rape, and murder of chattel slavery for 400 years. The terror and subjugation of Jim Crow for another 100 years. And the disenfranchisement, murder, and mass incarceration of the new Jim Crow, or James Crow Esquire, for the last 50 years. The propaganda has been so strong, Black people have even learned to hate themselves. Nowadays, America has been so successful in criminalizing its Black population, countries all over the world, including countries in Africa, view Blacks in America as over-sexualized, thuggish, criminal Negroes who are unproductive and bring justified death on themselves. Adolf Hitler is considered the most evil man in modern history. The history books tell us Adolf was a deranged madman, a murderous freak of nature. Europeans would have us believe Hitler was an aberration. Was he? Consider this. Hitler studied America's murder and oppression of Native Americans and blacks to learn how to subjugate and murder Jews. That's where he learned it. Consider this. Europeans or whites depopulated the North American continent of its indigenous people, murdering millions. Whites enslaved, oppressed, raped, and murdered millions of black people. Consider this. Whites would riot, rampage, terrorize, and murder black people, sometimes for their own amusement. Consider this. Black economic success can be very dangerous in America. The Greenwald section of Tulsa, Oklahoma, known as Black Wall Street, being the most tragic example of this. Black Wall Street, if you haven't heard of it, was a very economically successful black community. It was attacked and destroyed by jealous whites in 1921. Black Wall Street was actually the first community in America to be bombed from the air by Americans. 36 square blocks were looted and burned to the ground. Hundreds of blacks were murdered. No. Hitler is not an aberration, but evidence of the endemic pathology of the white community and white supremacy. The recent rash of murders of black people by law enforcement must be understood in the context of the white supremacy and racism that is part of the very fabric of America. First, understand the goals of white supremacy for black people. Black people are to be exploited, enslaved, or killed. They are killing black men, women, and children. Tamir Rice was 12 years old when he was shot down by law enforcement. See, a lot of these murders are tests to see how far they can go in killing black people. As soon as someone is shot down by cops, the propaganda kicks in strong. The victim is demonized and criminalized by the mainstream media. Then the reaction is gauged. And if too strong, the reaction and protests are demonized by the mainstream media. Take, for instance, the protesters of Baltimore. They were defined as a lynch mob by law enforcement, and this line was pushed throughout the mainstream media. Young people in Baltimore who were manipulated into violent reaction were quickly demonized by the mainstream press and defined as thugs. The dominant population was convinced the burning of a CVS store was much more evil than the murder of an innocent black man. I'm going to repeat that so that you let that sink in. The dominant population, meaning white people, was convinced that the burning of a CVS drugstore was much more evil than the murder of an innocent black man. Each time the reaction to the murders are gauged, each time, is the reaction controllable? Can the violence be contained? Can the murders be made acceptable? Until the reaction is strong enough, until the consequences harsh enough to make it too costly for law enforcement to murder black people, it will continue and probably escalate. Until we understand the use of propaganda and how to use it, the murders will continue to be justified. And we can't wait until we're sitting in concentration camps to figure this out. I'm Patrice Gibbs. It's the open eye. WHGE 95.3 FM. Yeah, that's funky. Finger scratching by, is that by Patrice Gibbs. Yeah, it's something that, as these things happen, I see a lot of talk about the revolution. We talked about the revolution in the late 60s, early 70s. During the late 60s and early 70s, at the height of the Black Power movement, there was a lot of talk about the revolution. The revolution that was going to put the black man in the driver's seat. The revolution that was going to bring a new day for black people. The US government destroyed the Black Power movement. Don't make no mistakes about that. The leaders of the Black Power movement were jailed, exiled, murdered, or bought off. The revolution didn't happen. By the 1980s, there was a solid black middle class. Pursuing the American dream and materialism became the rule of the day. Black people were integrating and assimilating. Black militancy actually became a joke. Black militants became a caricature, a character on sitcoms, a relic to be laughed at. Black Panther co-founder Bobby Seale was selling barbecue sauce. The revolution didn't happen. During the 1990s, auto scholarship, Afrocentricity, and hip hop awakened a new generation of conscious black people, a generation that lionized the leaders of the Black Power era and viewed the current black leaders as complacent and self-serving. They heard the more militant voices of their day, like Louis Farrakhan and Khalid Muhammad. They also began to study the works of our great elders and master teachers, like Chancellor Williams, John Henrik Clarke, Drusilla Dunjee Houston, and Cenk Anta Diop. New disciplines emerged and the consciousness spread, and the flicker of revolution sparked again. It was not to last. The generations of miseducation and indoctrination have a strong hold on black people. Even those that begun to free themselves from the shackles of mental slavery began to revert. Afrocentrism became suspect. Anybody that wanted to claim consciousness could go to your local African boutique and get your culture kit for $99.99, including kufi, a map of Africa pendant. Now, you're ready for Black History Month. Once Sears and J.C. Penney, that was in the 90s, they were still around, got in on the exposed the phonies who bought their black culture kit from white people. The coming generation was bombarded with the propaganda of materialism, sexism, violence, and the worship of criminality and thuggery. Hip-hop was corrupted. The American penal system became the prison industrial complex. Prison became privatized big business. Prison stock traded on Wall Street. State governments signed contracts with privatized prisons. These contracts required the government to populate and pay for these prisons. To do so, the government employed the technique of organized chaos. Let me explain that. Organized chaos is when a government orchestrates a containable level of criminality and violence within a population or amongst people to criminalize a segment of that population to the extent that that population itself will appeal to the government to address the very situation the government caused. This is done by reducing or eliminating employment, increasing poverty, decreasing social services or limiting social services to women, eliminating and discouraging a male figure in the house while applying pressure to that male population to support families without viable income. These men are pushed into the underground economy. The illegal contraband is actually provided by the government. Pushed into the underground economy where they are either jailed or killed, leaving children with no chance of a father in the house, guaranteeing dysfunctional families. Violence in the streets has become the norm, and black on black crime has become a popular term in the lexicon. The propaganda being blacks have bought these conditions on themselves, have brought these conditions on themselves. More stringent laws have been passed, often supported by black people. Draconian, racist law enforcement becomes more blatant. Judicial bigotry becomes more sophisticated. Zero tolerance turns miseducation into institutionalized indoctrination. The school to prison pipeline overflows and prison populations explode. White supremacy has found a new way to enslave. The revolution didn't happen. In the second decade of the 21st century, there's been a surge amongst the ranks of the conscious. This is no doubt fueled by the information highway. Now their phones are literally handheld computers. Any topic you want information on is at your fingertips. This has been good for black consciousness. More black people than ever are studying true African history, not the whitewashed European fantasy. The ranks of the conscious have expanded to the extent that it has become a self-defined community. In cities across the country, there are so many black people eager to learn that the thirst for knowledge has spawned a lecture circuit. More and more black people from all walks of life are learning the truth about our history, our condition, the vestiges of white supremacy, and the reality of our relationship to the white race. As the shackles of mental slavery are unlocked, more black people clearly understand the white race is black people's declared enemy. Stated another way, by dint of his actions, the white man has himself declared the black race his enemy. The white race, including Europeans, Arabs, East Asians, has shown that they have every intention of exploiting black people. If they cannot exploit us, they will enslave us. If they can't enslave us, they will kill us. We are in a struggle for our survival. We are in a state of war. As the reality of our condition and state becomes clear to more and more of conscious people, the buzz of revolution is once again in the air. As the injustice, brutality, murder, and oppression of white supremacy continue to plague Black people, the more passionate among us have issued a call to arms to end the domination of the white race. Has the time come? Look at the people that have been killed recently by law enforcement: men, women, and children, even the elderly. Is it any wonder there are those amongst us that are ready to go today? Are we ready to wage war? Are we ready to make the revolution happen? I freed 1,000 slaves. I could have freed 1,000 more if only they knew they were slaves. It's a quote from Harriet Tubman. Here in the U.S., we are outnumbered, outfinanced, outgunned. Compared to the U.S. military, the best weapon average citizens have access to be pea shooters. The military has guns that can see in the dark and shoot around the corner. What's worse is the indoctrination is so deep, many Black people are blind to the reality of our condition and are quite satisfied with their lot. This diminishes the number of reliable warriors. To wage war or start a revolution, the proper steps have to be taken. The rules of revolution: vision, planning, clarity of purpose, collective trust, and most importantly, unity. These have been the ingredients of every successful revolution. Furthermore, there must be dedication to the point of ruthlessness. For the rules of war refer to the time-tested principles of Sun Tzu's The Art of War. It is advisable for all potential warriors, especially potential leaders, study the art of war. Every battle is won before it is ever fought. This is one of Sun Tzu's most significant quotes. It speaks not only to the paramount importance of planning, but also the importance of strategic maneuvering that damages and weakens the adversary. The general that is skillful in attack leaves his opponent not knowing what to defend. Attacking the adversary on fronts he is too comfortable or arrogant to even consider defending, or doesn't even feel the need for alarm, is a tactic on the road to conquering. Sun Tzu said in The Practical Art of War, the best thing of all is to take the enemy's country whole and intact. To shatter and destroy it is not so good. So too, it is better to recapture an army entire than destroy it. To capture a regiment, a detachment, or a company entire than destroy them. Hence, to fight and conquer in all your battles is not supreme excellence. Supreme excellence consists of breaking the army's resistance without fighting. Blood is a big expense. An expenditure Black people had paid excessively. It would not be fortuitous for Black people in America to take up arms and go on the offensive and spill blood. As a matter of fact, it would be disastrous, primarily because America has planned for such an event. The casualties would be overwhelming, and the resulting oppression would hearken to the days of antebellum slavery. History teaches us that every empire that was taken was already in a state of decay. America is still rich and militarily powerful. However, structurally, socially, and politically, the already morally bankrupt American empire is in decay. Eventually, the American empire will be ripe for taking from the inside out. Black people in America need to believe in and understand our abilities. Every field or arena Black people enter, Black people dominate. From sports and entertainment to science and politics. Whatever your feelings on Barack Obama, the fact of the matter is he became president because he was just politically slicker than all his opponents. If conscious Black people in America learn to employ the tactic of infiltration, infiltrate every institution from the halls of government to academia, we can affect everything from how the money is spent to what policies are enacted. Blacks in America may be outnumbered, outfinanced, and outgunned, but we do not have to continue to be outsmarted. Black people can no longer continue to amble along haphazardly, hoping on a prayer, a dream, and dumb luck. You can't be lucky all the time, but you can be smart every day. If Black people move with tactical intelligence, that revolution that has yet to happen can take on a whole new meaning. I'm Patrice Gibbs. This has been a special edition of the Open Eye for Black History Month. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks to those that joined me. And like I said, you know, the Open Eye, we do not deal in mental masturbation or ego digging. This is WHGE 95.3 FM. Peace. All right. Thanks for joining me. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something. I enjoyed bringing it to you. See you Saturday.